Hey you guys, so I decided to hop on here real quick and talk about my gifts as a medium, which I just started to use that terminology the other day, so I'm kind of proud. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what do I do, what do I feel, what's going on, how is it that I can, how do I obtain this information? So for starters, there's basically, let's see, 5 main gifts that I have the ability to use. And so I'm gonna go through them right now. There's a little bit more, but I'm not gonna touch on those right now because I'm not technically using them. First one is clairsentience, which is the ability to feel. I've always had that one on. That one's never kind of blurred away. So I'll be able to feel very deeply what other people feel, what other people are thinking sometimes, what other people, pains in people's bodies, just kind of like what they're thinking sometimes, and if that creates an emotional reaction, then definitely it's going to transfer over. So the clairsentient part, that is something that I experience constantly. There's also claircognizance, which is where your thoughts are your thoughts, but then there's other thoughts that kind of come in there, and you're kind of like, where is this thought coming from? And then you kind of like follow that chain, and as you learn discernment, through discernment, how do you identify, where this information is coming from, who is it coming from, all kinds of stuff like that. You're able to kind of channel better things, the information, and you can kind of hear your thoughts and know that they're not your thoughts, and kind of just, there's obviously something else that's kind of bringing it through. And if you know how to ask the right questions, then you'll be able to identify where this information is coming from and whether it's something that is useful for you, useful for someone that you're talking to, useful for the collective as a whole, things like that. There's also clairaudience, which is the ability to hear. And so I can hear my guides. I can hear spirits talking to me. And I set up some boundaries, of course, because you need boundaries. Because guess what? I'm still in charge. You got to be able to stand in your power and things like that. Otherwise, this stuff is not going to settle well with you. You might feel like you're going crazy. So my guides and my spirit team, they talk to me on my left side, in my left ear, and my spirits, they communicate with me through my right side. And why do they do that? Because I told them to. Because I want to make sure who is who, and how do I ask, the next set of questions, and things like that. Let's see. Then there's clairvoyance. That's like the popular one, where you can see pictures, you see video clips, you see, images, visions. It can come before, after. All this information can come to you before it happens. It can come months in advance. It all depends on why it's being used, why it's being shared with you, things like that. And then the last one, number 5, would be dream interpretation. And dream interpretation, I'd say, is easier to identify and understand if you're using the clairs in order to support the dream interpretation. And so that kind of took me a little bit to kind of click all that together and figure out, how do I use all these different clairs in order to support this person who's having this dream, and then they don't know what's going on. I will say, if you dream of somebody who's passed away, that is probably, for me, the easiest dream to interpret, because you only have to just ask that person to come forward and tell you why they're in the person's dream. It's not complicated in that regard, but sometimes if it's up to the person to interpret, like, it's their dream, they're experiencing it, and sometimes it's like you don't want to take away what their reality is. But you can always call in their higher self. You can call in their guides and say, like, well, what are you trying to pass on? And usually it's a bigger message, and usually it's something that you can kind of gather from the guides and then kind of bring forward and end up supporting the person, the individual, the client with that information, because the bigger message is really what matters here, not the finite details of why was there a dragon? It's like, that stuff is not important. It's kind of what that stuff symbolizes, and what does that represent, and what is that creating in you. So yeah, those are some of the gifts that I use. The way that I use that in my newly launched Etsy mediumship business, which is only one thing that I'm doing, but I am using all of those gifts together to basically kind of like channel a message. I basically write a story of what is happening, what do I feel, what do I think, who am I talking to, how is it coming forward. I ask certain questions, and you're reading everything that I'm writing, and that's allowing you to kind of be present with me in that moment while it's happening, despite when it is that I give it to you, usually within 24 hours. But that is how I'm using my gift right now to support. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has. I'm sure there will be questions, but that's where I'm at right now in my life. So thank you for listening.